Good morning, and welcome to our Sunday morning forum. We hold this forum each Sunday morning at 9:30 a.m. at Fellowship Bible Church, Middleburg, Florida. Welcome. And we'll begin this week's lesson, and we will be looking at John's reaction and Jesus' assurance, beginning with Revelation chapter 1, verses 17 through 18. Please follow along as I read 17 through 18. Verse 17, "And when I saw him, I fell at his feet as dead. But he laid his right hand on me, saying to me,
'Do not be afraid. I am the first and the last. I am he who lives and was dead, and behold, I am alive forevermore. Amen. And I have the keys of Hades and death.'"
Let's take a closer look at the first phrase in verse 17, and we'll call 17a. And it reads, "When I saw him, I fell at his feet as dead." John was overwhelmed by the awesome vision. Even though he was an apostle who knew Jesus on this earth, he was still totally blown away. Even the 3 years John spent with Jesus on earth did not really prepare him to see Jesus in his heavenly glory. At this moment, John knew what a miracle it was that Jesus could shield his glory and authority while he walked on earth. Spurgeon writes, "Blessed position, does the death alarm you? We are never so much alive as when we are dead at his feet." And a second quote, "It matters not what aileth us if we lie at Jesus' feet. Better be dead there than alive anywhere else." End quote. The phrase we'll look at is found in 17, and I labeled it B. And it laid his hand on me. First, Jesus comforted John with a compassionate touch. Perhaps the touch of Jesus felt more familiar than the appearance of Jesus. Then Jesus gave John a command: "Do not be afraid." Jesus didn't need to be afraid because he was in the presence of Jesus, and Jesus clearly identified himself to John with these titles. Jesus is the first and the last, the God of all eternity, Lord of eternity past and present future. Richard Victor writes, "The first, the last, the first by creation, the last by retribution, the first because before me there was no God formed, the last because after me there shall be no other, the first because from me all things, the last because to me all things return." Verse 18, Jesus is the one who lives and was dead and is alive forevermore. He has the credentials of resurrection and lives to never die again, unlike Lazarus, who was raised from the dead. He did die again. The victory that Jesus won over sin and death was a permanent victory. Jesus is the one who has the keys of Hades and death. Some imagine that the devil is somehow Lord of Hell. Some imagine that the devil has authority or power to determine life or death. Clearly, they are wrong, for only Jesus holds the keys, or in other words, to open doors, of Hades and death. We can trust that Jesus never lets the devil borrow the keys.
Richard of St. Victor writes, "The first, the last, the first by creation, the last by retribution. The first, because before me there was no God formed. The last, because after me there shall be no other. The first, because from me are all things. The last, because to me all things return."
Revelation 1, verses 19 through 20, with a title, A Command to Write, and an explanation. We begin to read. Please follow along in verse 19. Write the things which you have seen, and the things which are, and the things which will take place after this. The mystery of the 7 stars, which you saw in my right hand, the 7 golden lampstands. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands which you saw are the 7 churches. The first phrase we're going to be looked at is labeled 19a, and it is write the things. Now, this command, and make no mistake, this was a command, sets up the structure of the understanding of the book of Revelation. John is commanded to write regarding the past, the present, and the future. From John's perspective. The next phrase we're going to be looking at is a continuation of the first phrase we looked at. We label this one 19b, and it reads, the things which you have seen. That is, write down the things which you have seen. This means that Jesus wanted John to write the things he had seen in his vision of the glorious heavenly Jesus, and not keep it to himself. And the next phrase, which is a continuance of the first phrase we looked at, we'll label this one 19b. The things which you have seen. This means that Jesus wanted John to write the things he had just seen in his vision, the glorious heavenly Jesus. He wasn't to keep it to himself, but to spread the good news. The next phrase is found in 19, and we'll label this one 19c. The things which are. This means that Jesus wanted John to write about the things of his present day, the things regarding the 7 churches which are in Asia. And moving on now to 19, labeled D, the things which will take place after this. This means that Jesus wanted John to write about the things that would happen after the things regarding the 7 churches, the things of the last days. Let's take a look at the structure we have just been talking about. The book of Revelation is arranged in 3-part structure. The things which you have seen, this being John, Revelation chapter 1. The things which are, Revelation chapter 2 and 3. the things which will take place after this, Revelation 4 through 22. It should make reading these chapters a little bit easier to interpret, knowing this fact. Moving on now to verse 20. The 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches, and the 7 lampstands which you saw are the 7 churches. Jesus interpreted this his own vision for John. The stars in his hand represent the angels of the 7 churches. The lampstands represent the 7 churches themselves. We note that each church had its own angel, and Jesus held these angels in his hand. Now, some believe that these angels are the pastors of these 7 churches. That's possible. This is an idea based on the literal understanding of the ancient Greek word translated angels as angelos. The word literally means messenger, and certainly pastors are messengers to the churches. Others think the angels might be guardian angels over each congregation. Some suggest that the angels are not literal beings at all, but they just represent the prevailing spirit of the churches. There are strengths and weaknesses to any of these interpretations, but we do know that in some ways these angels are representatives of each of the congregations. Now, Adam Clark writes,
Angel of the church here answers exactly to that officer of the synagogue among the Jews called the messenger of the church, whose business it was to read, pray, and teach in the synagogue. Clark.
The important thing here is not which angel belonged to which church or whether the angel was the pastor. The important thing to remember here is that the angels were in the right hand of Jesus. This is a place of safety and strength. This was a spectacular vision, and many people wish they could have spectacular visions like John had, but we can know the very same Jesus John saw. We can know his purity, his eternal wisdom, his searching judgment, his victory, his authority, and his majesty. Each of these aspects of his true nature are ours to know intimately. When we think of John in spectacular vision, we should remember where John was. He was imprisoned on Patmos. John is often known most intimately in the midst of the suffering and trials. Both John and Stephen, Acts 7:54 through 60, saw Jesus most clearly and gloriously in the context of suffering for the cause of Jesus. Cease writes, "The wrath of the wicked does but bring saints the nearer to the choice favors of God." Thank you for joining our group today, and this will conclude the first chapter of the book of Revelation. In our next section, we will begin studying the 7 churches in chapter 2 of Revelation. Till then, thank you for listening. God bless.